Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today, let's discuss the framework for a three-tier architecture. And here as you can see, I have a three-tier architecture design. This is for beginners. And if you look at this architecture, we have a VPC, we have availability zones, two availability zones. We have two public subnets. There's the other one. We have four private subnets. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And we have three tiers in this architecture. So you have tier 1, which has two public subnets, tier 2, which has two private subnets, and tier 3, which has two private subnets. So basically, what a three-tier architecture is a well-structured and commonly used architectural approach for building and deploying web applications. That's what it is. It separates the applications into three distinct layers, or you can call them tiers. Each of them has specific functions and responsibilities. So these layers, what they do is they work together to provide scalability, maintainability, and flexibility to your application. See, so the three tiers, basically they consist of your presentation tier, and that's your user interface or your client tier, which is the topmost layer that interacts directly with the users or your clients. Things like your web browsers, your mobile apps, your desktop applications, these are all resources within the presentation tier. So basically that's what the presentation tier is. So if you have an app in your phone, that is part of your presentation tier. The application tier is the next level, right? And it is known as the logic tier or the middle tier. So what the app tier does is requests that come from the presentation tier are processed in the app tier, so it performs computations, and then it interacts with the data tier, where you have the database. So the last of the tiers is the data tier, or the storage tier, or the backend tier. It is responsible for storing. You can retrieve data from there. You can manage data required by the application. One thing you need to know is that all three tiers can be horizontally scaled depending on what your requirements are. So, without any further delays, let's go straight to building a three-tier architecture. The first thing, as usual, we're going to do, and you can do this with Terraform. Maybe one of these days I'll build a three-tier architecture using Terraform. But I like to do this manually because it shows you, if you can do it manually, then it's easy for you to do it with an infrastructure as code application. So I create my VPC. I give it a name. I give it a CIDR block. And I leave my tag, and that should be good. Next thing, I'll go to my internet gateway, click Create Internet Gateway, give it a name. We have our tag there, Create Internet Gateway. The next thing I need to do is to come to my subnet, click Create Subnet, select your VPC. From our schematic, what we're going to do here is we're going to have two public subnets and four private subnets. We're going to have two route tables, route table for the public subnets and a route table for the private subnets. This is the first subnet, I'm going to give it a name. I'll copy that because I'll use it later. Let me put this in my availability zone A. I'm using US East 1 region. I give it a CIDR block. I'll add a new subnet down here, click it, scroll down, give it a name. I'll give it public subnet 2. Put this in US East 1B for high availability. Give it a side block number. Click add new subnet, scroll down, give it a name. Let's put it in US East 1A. Take our cider block. Come down here, click add new subnet, scroll down, give it a name. What I will do is I will change the names when I'm done. I'll assign my cider block. So I'll just change the name to follow my tiers so that it's easy to locate which subnet is in which tier. So we have two web tiers, which are public subnets. We have two app tiers, which are private subnets. And then we're going to have click add new subnet. We're going to have the last set, which is the data tier. Select availability zone. I take US East 1A. I'll give my cider block, and we'll take our last of the tiers of the subnets. Okay, I'll choose my availability zone B. Okay, so I'm going to do some cleanup on the names. Make sure everything is okay. I'm building according to the architectural diagram. We have everything in place. Click create your subnet. Once it is done, we're going to do some routing. They are all done, so we're going to do some routing. One thing you will note about VPC is that whenever you create your VPC, you have two resources that are created automatically with your VPC. One is a security group and the other is a route table. Under our route tables, we look at our VPC. This is our VPC. So this is the one that is created by default with our VPC. We'll give it a name. What we will do, we'll go back to our internet gateway. We select our internet gateway. We come to actions attached to VPC. Select our VPC. That's our VPC. We attach our internet gateway. So when we go back to our route table, we select our route table. We come down to routes and we click edit routes. We will be able to add a route whose destination is outside our VPC, and we select that any traffic going outside our VPC should target the internet gateway. Select that. Yeah, we have our internet gateway here. We're going to now associate our subnets with our public route table. So under subnet associations, we'll come down to edit subnet association. And then we pick our public subnets. We have two public subnets. So when we come here, we see that we have public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. And this is going to be in our web tier level. So we're picking those two subnets. We associate them. We hit save. Come back to our route table. Click create route table because we need a second route table, a private route table. Select a VPC. Click create. And now let's associate our private subnets with this route table. So we click all the private subnets. So we have done the routing and the associations with our route tables. Now we will come to our NAT gateway. We are going to create it. We are going to route our gateway to our private subnets. So under route NAT gateway, click create NAT gateway. Come here, give it a name. Select a subnet. Before we do that, let's come to our architecture. You see that our NAT gateway is in our public subnet. So we will put our NAT gateway in our public subnet. I'll choose public subnet 1 like you have here. The connectivity type is we want it to be public to have access to our internet gateway. So we allocate an elastic IP. If you have one, then you just select it. But if you don't have, come here, click allocate elastic IP. That creates an elastic IP automatically and associates it with your NAT gateway. We are done here. Click. Now you see I have my tags. If you notice, you would see that I've always been adding tags. Don't create infrastructure without tags, because under identity access management, you can secure your infrastructure just by the use of tags. So it's important that you always tag your resources when you create them. If you think by now you're learning something and you're gaining value, do well. Can you just subscribe and hit the like button, put a comment below? It helps me a lot. So from here, we come back to our routes, and then we associate the NAT gateway with our private route table. Remember, it was created in our public subnet, but we are going to associate it with our private route table. So we look for our private route table here, and then we come to routes, and then we edit route, add routes. Any traffic going outside our VPC from the private subnet, from our private subnets, targets the NAT gateway, and that's our NAT gateway there. Click save. Our routing is done. We are going to now move on to the next stage of creating security groups. We are going to do a concept that I call daisy chaining of security groups. So how that works is that when traffic comes from the internet gateway, from this architecture, you see that it hits an external load balancer that will distribute the traffic to the instances within this target group that we are going to create. So we are going to create a security group for the elastic load balancer. We are going to create a security group for the instances that will be in this target group. We are going to daisy chain this elastic load balancer security group to the security group of the instances in the target group. We are going to daisy chain the security group in the instances of the target group to the internal load balancer, elastic load balancer in the app tier. We are going to also daisy chain the security group from the internal load balancer of the app tier to the instances in the target group of the app tier, so on and so forth. Same thing with this, we are going to daisy chain it with the security group of the data layer. So that way, traffic only comes from one source. We don't expose many sources. So that's what we're going to do next. So we have so far created the VPC, internet gateway, public route table, private route table. Availability zones have been declared, subnets have been created, and associations and routing have been completed. NAT gateway has been created in the public subnet, and it's been associated with the private route table, right? So we are done here. Let's go and create our security group. So under security groups, now if you go look for the the VPC ID of this the security groups, you'll discover that there is one that is standing alone here. So let's look at this VPC. It ends in 0cc. Go back to our VPC and look for our new VPC we created. You see it ends in 0cc. So that's the default security group. We're going to select, let's name it as the first security group, which will be the external load balancer. So what we're going to do is to set our inbound rules. Simple. Inbound rules, it means how will traffic get into your load balancer and where is that traffic coming from. So we're going to say all traffic comes from anywhere on the internet. This is all we need to do here, just to ensure that the load balancer receives traffic from the internet. The next thing we're going to do is to change the type of protocol. We're going to use HTTP. So we are saying here that as long as people from the internet come via HTTP on port 80, they will be allowed to access the internet load balancer. They will be able to hit the internet load balancer. Now, I don't have a security certificate for my application, but the way it usually would go is that we will take HTTPS. In a real life environment, you will use HTTPS for 443. In that situation, you will need to provide your certificate, right, when you create your load balancer and all. So, but we don't have that. This is how it should be in real life. But I'm going to use port 80 because I don't have a certificate. So that's all you need to do here. We click save. We go back, create security group. This time we're going to create the security group for the instances in the web tier. So we'll now say that's it. We're allowing traffic only from the security group of the external load balancer. Select our VPC, add our inbound rule. In our inbound rule, we are going to go to the same HTTP. Here, we're going to say, we're going to search for the external load balancer security group. And this is it. So we'll select that. So this will be the source, the only source from which this security group will allow traffic. We'll add another rule, and this will be an SSH rule so that we can access our servers if there are issues. And this, I'll leave it open. Scroll down, add a tag, come back to our security groups, click create security group. We are going to now create for the internal load balancer of our app tier. We're going to choose our VPC, add our inbound rule. Here we're going to select HTTP, and then we're going to look for our web tier security group. That's all we're going to do here. Add a tag of name. We're going to now create the security group for the application tier. Now let's select our VPC and come to inbound rules. We're going to select HTTP and we're going to select the internal load balancer of the app, the security group of the internal load balancer, and then this is a security group for the app tier instances. So we also want to SSH into them if we have any issues. So we'll create another rule and select SSH, and we'll also leave it open for now. That's all we need to do here. We'll give our tag. So we have 4 security groups. We have the elastic load balancer, we have the web tier, we have the internal load balancer, we have the app tier, and now the data tier is what is next. So let's click create security group. Here for databases, if you look at our architecture, we are using MySQL, which runs on port 3306. So we'll look for the protocol, MySQL, Aurora, and that's what we need to do there. And then we come to our source and select our app tier security group. That's all we need here. We'll create a tag. So we are done with creating our security groups. They are all created. If I filter for tier, we have our load balancer, the elastic, and application load balancer. We have, so traffic leaves this and comes to this web tier. It leaves the web tier and goes to the internal load balancer of the app tier. It leaves there and goes to the app tier. It leaves the app tier and goes to the data tier. That's the way we set it up. So having done all these, we need to now go to our EC2 and create our launch template. Because if you look at our architecture, you will see that we have an auto-scaling group that is launching instances automatically for us. This helps in high scalability. We're using 2 availability zones for high availability. This gives us the advantage of high scalability. And then our target group is going to span across both availability zones and both subnets in both the web tier and the app tier. So now to launch a template, we click launch template here. There are going to be 2 launch templates, one for the web tier and one for the app tier. So we'll start with the web tier. We'll give a description. We'll select this because we need to use it for auto scale. We'll give a tag to the template. Okay, so we are not picking from any source, so we'll leave that blank. For our AMI, we come to quick start. Let's pick our Amazon Linux. I'll use Amazon Linux 2. The instance type, I'll leave it as T2 micro. Then our key pair, I'll select my key pair. In my network settings, I'm going to leave out the subnets. I want the auto-scaling group to determine which subnet the instances will be launched. I don't want to lock down the instance to a subnet. Let the auto-scaling group do its work. So I'm going to leave that empty. Then I'm going to select an existing security group. This security group is going to be the web security group, the security group for the instances that will be launched in the web tier. So we already have that, so we look for it. And then volume, 8 gig is okay for this lab. So we'll come to our advanced. This is an Amazon Linux instance. So I'll say sudo yum update. So when the instance is launched, it's going to carry out all these commands to update the package manager, to install HTTPD Apache, to enable it, to start it, and then we are going to copy this code into this file so we can view it in our web page as a web page. So let's create our launch template. This time we're going to create for our app tier launch template. This template actually will contain the logic application, which you will not see, but I just want to put something inside, so for us to be able to prove that we can gain access to the app tier. Let me use Ubuntu for this. My instance type will be T2 micro. Select my key pair. I will not select a subnet. I'll let the auto-scaling group do that. I will select my existing security group we created, which was the app tier security group. That's it here. And I'll scroll to my volumes and make sure I have volume. Okay, this is enough. And I'll come to my advanced details, and I'll also put just a small code. This is Ubuntu, so we will say so let me add sudo. I think I'm missing sudo, and create launch template. We'll come back to our launch template. Let's edit our web tier to include the details in our data, advanced details. I want to include sudo there. So let's modify launch template. Select that. I'll just scroll down. Everything remains the same. I just want to add sudo here. I don't want anything to fail. Create launch template. Everything remains the same, but I'm going to use version 2. So in the web tier, I have 2 versions. I'm going to use version 2. So if I come to my advanced details, I have the sudo there. Right, so we are done with the launch template. Let's go now to create our target groups. Hit create target group. We are going to be targeting instances, so we'll use that. And we'll give our target group a name. We'll leave our protocol and ports the same. We'll select our VPC. We'll leave these ones pretty much the same. We'll give it a name, tag. We'll click next. We've not created our auto-scaling groups, so there will be no instances to register to our targets. So we will create our target group. Create another target group for the app tier. We're also targeting instances. Select our VPC. Give it a tag. Save. No instances to register yet. We click create target group. Let's create our load balancer. Create load balancer. Here we have 2 load balancers, one external and one internal. They are both application load balancers, so we are going to start with the web load balancer, which will feed the web tier. Application load balancer. It will be internet facing, so you keep it at that. We'll select our VPC and we'll allow it send traffic to both availability zones that we defined when creating our network infrastructure. Here, this external load balancer let's look at it, is sending traffic to public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. So we are going to select these two subnets. Check for our public subnet. That's public subnet 1, which is a web tier subnet. Public subnet 2, which is a web tier subnet. Our security groups, deselect that. We created security groups for our external load balancer. You remember? It's actually the default security group. That was the first one we used. So we're going to select that. We are going to register our target group. We created a web tier target group for the load balancer to send traffic to, and we're going to leave everything here pretty much the same. Create load balancer. While it's creating, we'll go ahead and create the app tier load balancer. We'll do exactly the same thing. Here we're going to make it internal facing. So this load balancer doesn't have direct access to the internet. That's what we're saying. It's going to be feeding the app tier. We're going to select our VPC, and then we'll also select our availability zones. Now for the app tier, which is this, we have two subnets, private subnet 1 and private subnet 2. We're going to add those to this app tier, this load balancer. So not the data tier, the app tier private 1 and the app tier private 2, correct. Security groups, we created one for the app tier load balancer, the internal load balancer, so that's it here. We'll select that. Target group we already created for the app tier, select it, and we click create load balancer. Did I give a tag? Looks like I forgot to give a tag. So they are provisioning. We'll go ahead while it's being provisioned to create our auto scaling group. Guys, this is our final stage. If you've learned a lot so far, if you think you have been providing value to you, kindly subscribe, kindly share. If you're not going to subscribe, share. If you're not going to share, comment. If you're not going to comment, like. If you're not going to like, then click the bell button. Right? So here I'm going to give our auto scaling group a name, the web tier auto scaling group. The launch template we're going to be using is going to be the web tier launch template. Remember, we created launch template for that, and we modified it. So we're going to use the version 2 that we actually modified. So we're going to use that. Let's create next. Select your VPC. Select your availability zones and subnets. Here, this auto scaling group is for the web tier, right? So we are going to be dealing with public subnet 1 and public subnet 2. We're also going to be dealing with availability zone 1 and availability zone 2. So those are the areas we're going to focus on. So let's look for our public subnet 1 web tier. Let's look for our public subnet 2 web tier, and let's click next. We have a load balancer, right? So we click attach existing load balancer, and here we'll click our load balancer, which is a web tier load balancer. We'll pretty much leave everything the same. We'll select that, it's recommended. We're not going to, this is just a framework, like we're setting up a framework that we can build upon and develop further. So we leave this and we click next. Here, this is the area that helps us set the desired number of EC2 instances, the minimum number and the maximum number. So let's say the maximum number is 3. So let's go ahead and establish our target tracking policy, and that's it. So let's click next. This is for setting up SNS topic and email notifications. We'll skip that. Click next. We'll add a tag. Next. And we review what we've done so far. Make sure everything is all the way the architecture is designed to be. Click Create Auto Scaling Group. We'll go ahead and do the same for our app tier. Click our launch template for app tier. Click next. Select our VPC. Select our subnets and availability zones. The same thing we did for the web tier we're going to do here. We're going to look for the app tier private 1, app tier private 2. Click next. Okay, so we're here. We select our load balancer we created for the app tier. That's it here. We select that. We scroll down. We turn on elastic load balancer health checks. So this makes the load balancer go every period to check the instances to see if they respond. If they don't respond after a grace period, then it flags them as unhealthy and it stops sending traffic to those instances. Click next. We'll leave this the same. We'll come here and turn the maximum capacity to 3. And then we enable target tracking scaling policy. So let us click next, next, add a tag, and click next. So this is all the summary of what we've been developing, and then we click Create Auto Scaling Group. So by now the web tier auto scaling group should already have instances running. If you come to the web tier, you will see we have 2 instances running. One is the desired capacity is 1, the minimum capacity is 1. So it looks like it is flagged 1 as unhealthy. But we'll go and check something. Let's go to our target group and see our web tier target group. We see that it's flagging 1 unhealthy. That's why it's creating a second one. When it shows draining, it means it's deleting the one that is flagged unhealthy. So we are going to go up. You see, once you create your auto scaling group, your target group will automatically register those instances that are created. If we come to our instances, you will see that you have instances that are already running, and they will bear the name of our auto scaling group. So you see we have 2 for the web and 1 for the app. This is initializing, which means once it's done and it passes the health check, the first one that is already running will be terminated. So we can do a check right now. So let me see this. Both are running. So I'll terminate. Let's just terminate the instances to see what will happen. We'll just wait. We'll see a new instance from the web tier spin up. Wow, that's it there. There's a new instance spinning up. I want us to go into this instance once it starts running, and also SSH from here to access the web tier, the app tier. But before that will happen, once the instance starts running, I want to access it on the web, right? So for you to access that instance on the web, because we have a load balancer in front of it, which is this, I will use the DNS record of this load balancer to access the instances inside this target group. So let's go ahead and do that. come to your load balancer, select your web tier load balancer, scroll down, copy the DNS name, let's paste that. Yes, so what we effectively have done is we've been able to gain access to the web tier, right? This is what the clients will see. This is what you see on your phones when you check on your apps. This is the interface that you get to see. So you actually hitting on the load balancer and not the instance and not your application directly. So the load balancer, the traffic is going from the load balancer through the security group of the load balancer to the security group of the web instance and allowing that to get to the web instance. So that's why we're viewing this. So this is good, right? So what we can do here, we cannot do the same with the app tier because the app tier is not internet facing, right? It's internal, it's not internet facing. So you can't check it online. So I will go back to my instance and SSH into my SSH into my web tier instance. From there, I will gain access to my app tier. Let's check if we have our code in place in our app tier. So we click web tier, connect. Under our SSH client, we select our commands. We'll come down here to our terminal. I paste my command. Yes. Great. We are in our web tier web tier server. So what we'll do is let's check what we just saw on the web if it's actually here. So all I'll do is to cat my var and HTML, an index.html file, yes, this is the web tier. That's exactly what we saw here, right? That's what is inside our web tier application, our web tier server. So the next thing we will do is for us to be able to SSH into our application tier to carry out some tooling jobs and maintenance jobs. You can't SSH directly unless you have a key pair, right? So we already have a key pair. So what I will do is go to my .ssh file folder. If I ls, I have my public key in my authorized keys, but I don't have my private key pair. So I'm going to vi my private key pair. I'm going to bring it here into my server. I'll create another tab, clear the screen, and I'll use secure copy. I'll specify my key pair and I'll specify the file I want to copy. And I'll specify the instance I want to send the file to. So we're going to get the public IP of the instance. It's creating more because it's trying to, you see, this is a back and forth thing. You have to set your permission, your checks and health checks. You have to set all that very well to make sure that it registers only one instance on your timeline. So this is my public IP. And then I'm going to specify where I want to put the file. Okay, so I've securely copied it to my server. So I'll close this, come back to my server, CD to my home. When you ls, that's my key pair there. So I'm going to move my key pair to my SSH folder. Okay, so if you CD to our SSH folder and we ls, I have my key pair there, and next I'll give permissions. Great. So with this, I can now SSH to my app tier instance. So SSH -I my key pair, private key pair. This is Ubuntu now. Remember, we used Ubuntu. And then I'm going to get my private IP address for my Ubuntu. So we are in our Ubuntu. See that? So let's verify if our code is also in our Ubuntu. In Ubuntu, what we said was, let's come back to our launch template. In our app tier launch template, we chose Ubuntu as our server, and if you scroll down to our advanced details, we gave a command there. We said this is the app tier. So let's check if that's also in here. So we're going to cat var this is the app tier. So we've effectively set up our app tier, which is a logic tier where all the computations happen, and this app tier has direct access to our database to pull data from the database. So I log out. So I don't want to make this video too long, but if you like what you've seen so far, I'll stop the video here. What we've been able to do here is we've been able to set up a 3-tier architecture. We created a public app web tier. We also created an app tier. The data tier, what we're supposed to do there is, let me come here, is to come to our RDS and create a database. So I'm going to do this in the part 2 of this video. I don't want the video to be too long. I'll see you guys next time, and take care.